Okay, I'd like to call the UIC meeting to order. Do you have the, does anyone have the agenda?
You want to borrow my agenda?
Yeah, may I borrow your agenda? Thanks. So let's do the roll call.
Eglash here.
Valentine here.
Cook here.
Danaher here.
Okay, that's it. And are there oral communications? Any members of the public here to speak on any item not on the agenda? Nope. Okay, approval of the minutes.
I move that they're approved in their present form.
I second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor? Aye. None opposed. That's unanimous. Okay, agenda review and revisions. Was there anything we wanted to revise?
Yes, thank you. Yes, there is
It's like an order
on
question.
new business item 3, the status update on the 5 items of interest. Some people may recall that I previously recused myself from discussions of recycled water because I'm a Stanford employee. So I intend to recuse myself from that discussion again tonight for consistency. Because there's only 4 of us here, that would then drop us below a quorum. So I'd like to move that we limit the discussion of that new business item tonight to the first 4 items listed: FTTP, undergrounding, the second electrical connection, and electrification, so that I have no need to recuse myself. I believe that staff's update on recycled water will still be available for commissioners to read at their leisure, and I believe we can always ask to have that agendized for a future meeting where my recusal won't cause us to no longer have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, any reports from commissioners' meetings, events? All right, would you please give us the Director of Utilities report?
Thank you, Vice Chair Cook. This is Jane Ratchey, Assistant Director of Utilities, here in place of the Director. And so we have a fairly brief report tonight. First, the topic of communications. Utilities staff has been working closely with the Office of Emergency Services, Public Works, and other city departments on water, storm, flood, and emergency preparedness in anticipation of an El Nino type rain season. City staff has prepared a new utility safety brochure and distributed safety and emergency preparedness tips in multiple utility bill inserts, ads, social media, and on the web. Staff attended neighborhood and business group meetings to educate customers about emergency preparedness and the resources available to them in advance of, during, and after a storm. The webpage, cityofpaloalto.org/storms, provides a wealth of information on these subject matters. Although winter may bring heavy rain, staff continues to communicate that drought regulations are still in effect, and the state will likely extend the water use restrictions past February should the drought conditions persist. The second topic is PG&E and trees. And as part of its Pipeline Safety Initiative program, PG&E is clearing vegetation and any structures close to or on top of its large gas transmission line that runs through Palo Alto. Public Works is leading the effort to coordinate with PG&E to ensure that the work is carried out in accordance with city standards and that proper mitigation measures are taken to equitably replace any lost trees or structures. December 2nd, that's tonight, PG&E is hosting a public meeting about its plans for work in Palo Alto related to its Pipeline Safety Initiative, and I believe that meeting actually started at 7 o'clock as well. And finally, some noteworthy events in November. Included on November 5th, we had a facilities managers meeting at TIBCO, and that includes all the facilities managers from the large customers in the Stanford Research Park mostly. On November 12th, staff met with French delegates to discuss technology and utility programs. Also on November 12th, the Utility Marketing Program Administrator Lacey Lutz spoke to the Kiwanis Club about utilities programs. And on November 13th and 14th, the city hosted the Building Carbon Zero California Conference, which was followed by a pedal house tour of sustainable homes in Palo Alto. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Thanks very much for the report. As there is no unfinished business, let's go ahead to new business. We have some visitors. Thank you very much for coming tonight.
Right, so we have our city manager, Jim Keene, who will introduce the recruiter for the utilities director.
Great, Commissioners, thank you. It's nice to be here with you this evening. I actually going to have to get over to this meeting at Mitchell Park with PG&E and the community. I would just sort of say that the feedback we were getting back on their initial approach for the design of the community meeting didn't sound like it was going to be one that would work very well in Palo Alto. So I feel required to go over it. At a minimum, just say, we told you so, okay? So anyway. As you all know, our 9-year veteran leading utilities is retiring as of December 31st, and we thought it would be a good idea to come to the commission, bring Terry Black-Brown, who is the executive recruiter, who will be conducting and is conducting the recruitment, introduce her, let Terry talk to you a little bit about the schedule. And then the thinking at this point, even though we're in the early stages of it, would be to get some input from the commission regarding both sort of issues facing the utility and our community as you see it, qualities or characteristics you might be interested in seeing in the next director. This doesn't have to be Palo Alto complete or exhaustive at this point, because this is really early on. This is as much for Terry getting the kind of background that she would often have when she's having preliminary conversations with people and able to sort of say, well, from the Utilities Advisory Commission, for example, these are the sorts of things that we're hearing. We'll ultimately be back, and maybe Terry will briefly talk about the schedule, but there'll clearly be a role for commission representation in the actual interview process itself, and we'll have obviously this position's so important, we're going to have a pretty intensive process itself. So there'll be more opportunities for input, and I got an email from Commission Chair Foster saying that he and 2 other people were not going to be able to be here, and we offered that Terry could make herself available for some individual phone calls to repeat sort of what we're doing here, so we get at least an initial pass from the whole commission at the outset. So with that, I'll turn it over to Terry to introduce herself. She has done a number of recruitments for the city. I've used just about every executive recruiter in local government in California. She's by far the most effective, the best, the most hands-on, the most intensive and active on doing the outreach part, which in many ways is the most crucial part of the process, is to get the potential candidates here and into the process. So, Terry?
Excellent. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Commissioners, for allowing us time on your agenda this evening. So as Jim indicated, I've done some work for Palo Alto. Most recently recruited your fire chief and planning director. And I have known Jim for a number of years, so delighted to be back. It's truly an honor to be representing the city in this really critical recruitment. The timeline is such that over the last couple of weeks in early December, getting feedback from a variety of stakeholders, including yourselves, our intent is to do somewhat of a soft opening of the recruitment before the late December holidays. And so we have a soft opening, sort of an introduction. The job is already announced as an upcoming opportunity on our website, but we'll go very, very heavy into the actual recruiting in January, and that entails extensive national advertising, use of social media, but a lot of our resources are dedicated to personal outreach, on the phone, going to conferences, trying to drum up interest in the opportunity, and not just massive casting of the net and trying to get as many candidates as possible, but really looking for those top-notch individuals who are uniquely suited to lead this unique and rare department. So the recruitment will be open for a month, will be open through January, and close the end of January, early February. Series of interviews, certainly as Jim indicated, opportunities, at least one opportunity for the commission to participate. And we anticipate putting the city in a position of making a selection end of February, early March. So in terms of a transition time after that, how long it takes for the person to get here will certainly depend on where they're coming from. So I would say early spring is a safe estimate of when we can expect the new director to take his or her role.
And if I just might say a couple other things, some of this you may know, just as far as managing the transition, I have asked Assistant City Manager Ed Shikata to serve as the sort of interim utilities director. It's a decision I also made in consultation with Val. We did some looking at retired utilities directors in the state. Nothing really panned out there in an effective way. Not taking anything away from our current staff, but even if we were to assign somebody on staff within the department, we lose that capacity there. So Ed is, he's a former city manager of San Jose, longtime assistant city manager there. He's a director of public works. He's a PE. He's a civil engineer. And I think he has the right skill set, even though he hasn't been a utilities director. He's connected enough here, and I think he'll be able to provide some really kind of good assessment, sort of here as we go through the process itself and as we bring on a new permanent director to kind of help move us forward. Now, that being said, in many ways, this is just an absolutely terrible time to be recruiting for people in local government in these positions in Palo Alto. And this will be an exceptionally challenging one, partly because this is a pretty small niche of capacity, and the market is in many ways pretty small. I mean, particularly those who would work in a municipal utility. We have all of these issues of within California or coming from outside of California, I think that we've talked about this. This is going to be very challenging, and there really is, we're going to have to rely on you all and anybody else also on the sort of ideas about the personal contact and the outreach. In addition, all of the things that we're well acquainted with, the high cost of living here, the difficulty in commuting very far, factors even in some of Val's decisions themselves, all make it kind of challenging to bring people from outside the area these days into local government. That being said, this is an amazing opportunity, and with your help as to how we frame what the opportunity can be, there's certainly the chance that we can get the right person. We've brought some fantastic people on in some other slots, and we have a great reputation as a community and as an organization. We have a good brand. But that just being said, I'd rather be doing something else right now than talking to you guys about finding a replacement for Val, but that's where we are. Thanks.
May we ask some questions and make some comments? What's the schedule for preparing a formal job description?
We hope to have the what we call the recruitment brochure, which is a fancy way of putting the job description together within the next couple of weeks.
Can I just sort of add to that? I mean, so we actually have sort of the official bureaucratic job description that suits our purpose, but the profile, which is pretty much a, 4 to 6 page piece both describes the community and this piece. That said, there'll probably be some supplemental materials that we will be providing, for example, as we really identify range of issues or perspectives in those things.
And can you comment on what parts of the process are private where the candidates' names are not shared, and at what point it becomes public and the candidates' names are shared?
Thank you. The confidentiality of the process is really, really important in order for us to attract the best candidates. So the names of the candidates would remain confidential. Most of the names would remain confidential throughout the process. The only name that would become public would be the candidate selected at the very end of the process.
And if I can just add to that, Steve, just so you understand, so, you know, in our system, the city manager makes the appointments. Most of the executive leadership positions as a requirement of the charter require the council's approval of the appointment. It doesn't give the council any more voice than approve or not approve. I would say that even though confidentiality is pretty much a necessity in any of these kinds of recruitments, not every organization manages that process well, and I can say we've been great in Palo Alto in doing that, particularly in the fact that we've engaged, you know, people from the public, community members at times in the process, and we've never had a leak or a breach of that in the almost 8 years that I've been here. And I know as a prospective candidate at times in the past, that track record and the applicant's belief in that privacy and confidentiality is a real critical factor in people applying.
I had just one other comment. So in this process, you've actually been engaged by Jim or by the city's HR department? Who are you actually working for?
Jim.
And so you've either provided to Jim or will provide to Jim a detailed written search strategy, how you intend to go find candidates. And I guess as you think about that, I'd be particularly I'd encourage you to focus on the unique characteristics of a municipally owned utility. That doesn't mean we want to limit our search to people from MOUs. That would be way too small a potential population, and you'd miss lots of qualified people. But an MOU is way different from an investor-owned utility, and the requirements of the director of an MOU are pretty different. And so as you think about where to go find qualified and interested candidates, I think one of the lenses where you want to view that is through the attributes of an MOU. And you know, whether that means you go look at investor-owned utilities, or whether that means you go look at companies like Solar City, or whether that means you go look at the middle management ranks of PG&E. I mean, or a million other things that I'm sure you have thought of. I don't mean to prejudge or micromanage that from here, but just that I think there's a unique municipally owned utility lens, and I encourage you to talk to as many people as you can to try to figure out what the implications of that are.
Thank you.
One quick general thought. If you're searching for, and of course I think you are, the long-term candidate who lasts for decades, my general sense is that you need someone who's got a lot of core competencies and wisdom at the transmission level of all of the different utilities that are used, as well as quite a bit of depth on the distribution end. Because again, I think more and more as point-of-use technologies get smarter and smarter, things shift from being problems that are only solved on the transmission side to ones which are solved on both ends, the transmission and distribution, or even potentially on the customer side of meters. And so if you end up with somebody who's stellar at all kinds of transmission type logistics of water, natural gas, power, but they are sort of blind on the other side, then that might limit their long-term applicability.
No, I think tell the candidates they've got an excellent staff to work with, brilliant, and the sweetest commissioners they could talk with. So it should be good. Mostly the obvious. It has to be someone with deep environmental beliefs on that. And I think Val's done a superb job. In my short experience, I've been real impressed with the department and the staff. It is a time of a lot of change and innovation going on, so we need somebody who's going to be excited by that and open to those, creative things. And that's hard to bridge, keeping the wheels running on the bus and at the same time thinking about new patterns of use and energy efficiency and distribution and the like.
I really appreciate the city manager that you've gotten you've thought about this interim person, because obviously that's going to last for a while, and I think I'm thinking it might last for even longer than you've expected.
I think that you will be correct in your prediction.
And
I hope you're both wrong.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, we very much.
She gets paid less and less the longer
that's
it
right.
takes.
Okay, good. I really appreciate that you're involved, Ms. Black-Brown. I think this is clearly a unique opportunity. This is a utility that has more utilities, a municipal utility, and that has more utilities under it, as you've already noted, than any other utility I know. We have, if not the most progressive, certainly a very progressive environmental policy and implementation of that policy, or policies. As other commissioners have said, this is a fantastic staff. There are plenty of challenges that both the search for the Director of Utilities mirrors problems we have in attracting and retaining senior staff, maybe staff at all levels, actually, when I think about it. This is, and we've seen it's been very difficult to keep and find great people. We've had lots of times where the utilities has had numerous personnel openings and has a difficult time filling those. There's one thing I think hasn't been necessarily mentioned is that there's a huge demand for these folks. So the utility models are changing drastically, quickly, radically, and people who can manage those things and have skills within this, all these different skills, are moving to, are attractive candidates for lots of utilities and startups and private companies. So I wish you all the best, and I think that you're able to offer a fantastic position that it's an amazing opportunity to work in a city that has progressive policies as well as low rates. And we have a fantastic staff that will work with this person. We've taken a clear leadership role, not just in the environmental things that we're all very focused on here at the Utilities Commission, but on things that we don't have as much influence over, which is safety. So tonight's meeting is a great example of how other utilities have had a very hard time running utility in a frugal manner that is at the same time incredibly safe, and you have to have a horizon. You're looking at things in a very different way, and in a way, Commissioner Valentine's comment is really key, because you are looking for someone hopefully who would stay for a while, but they certainly have to have a vision of the future, and they have to have a vision of how do we run this utility for in perpetuity in a safe and cost-efficient manner. And keeping in mind safety, our environmental goals, and having low rates. And those things are in opposition. There's a great tension on those things. And we all want low rates, but we have to maintain our gas pipelines, and we have to maintain our infrastructure so that it's safe and it's long-lasting. You'll have, this person will have to deal with also a fairly political city, a small and powerful and engaged citizenry. So they have to be able to both lead an organization in a very strong and effective manner and engender the best of these wonderful people that are on the staff. At the same time, being second-guessed by a utilities commission, a city council, and a city manager who are going to who are going to have divergent views of what that person should be doing, in addition to this full-time position of managing this fantastic staff we have. So this is both an amazing opportunity and one that is very difficult. And that's not to mention also the fact that we have multiple utilities that are all equally, they're all heavily regulated in different ways by different folks, and the amount of regulation is not going to be diminished over time. So the person has to be flexible in dealing with all those things: the ratepayers, the citizens, the leadership, the staff, and the regulatory framework that they're getting into, while trying to implement interesting and innovative policies, and deal with an industry that is being torn apart and being rebuilt at the same time. So we have this incredible change, this amount of change that's going on, and the business models will, and Commissioner Ballantyne touched on this, the traditional business model of the utilities is gone. We don't know where we're going, and so this person is going to have good ideas, but also a way to sort of be nimble enough to handle all the changes as they come. And maybe on some of our utilities, they become a more regional. There may be a more regional control over those utilities. Maybe on some of the utilities we are simply, as we are now, simply a pass-through and maintaining the distribution system. But how do we do all that? How do we conserve water and encourage conservation and yet keep our rates down and not be charging extra money for those people who are conserving? It's a monumental task. So I think it's going to be, and I think that Director Fong has been an exceptional person to lead this organization. So I've only known her for the 6 years I've been on this commission, but I feel very fortunate that as a ratepayer and a citizen here, that she's been leading this fantastic group of people, and she has handled all those things that I've just outlined, and there's many more. And so I think we're incredibly lucky to have had her, and we will miss her. And I wish you all the best in finding a person who can both replace her and then take us to the next level. So thank you.
Of course, we hope Vice Chair Cook will apply for the position.
You beat me to it.
Yeah, no, actually, after I said all that stuff, I can't even imagine.
We do want the person to be able to exercise good judgment, though, also, right?
I'm out.
I'm
definitely out.
I hate to say it. When I was listening to you, I apologize for this digression, but this was a number of years ago when I was in Sacramento, and the chairman of the LA County Board of Supervisors called me up. They were looking for a new CAO. And I said, no, I'm not interested in the job, but I'd be happy to help you with the recruitment. I said, do you have any interest in people interested in the position? He said, oh, there's a lot of people who are interested in the position. And I said, Don, anybody who's interested in that position isn't qualified to take it. The only person you want is somebody who knows how impossible it is. And that is true, because there are people who listening to the vice chair, you could imagine the right person would be fired up by that opportunity to not put off by it. So that's who we've got to find.
Yeah, it's a chance to welcome the future for this community, fight for the community, fight for the environment, fight for low rates, and to usher in this new era. It's going to be exciting, so anyway, thank you so much for taking this on. I do think that it's going to be, imagine how difficult it's going to be, and then imagine it being more difficult. And you know, we would love to assist in any way we can, the city manager making the decision. I just think it's going to be a unique person to fill this unique role. Thank you so much.
One small suggestion, whether it's worth anything, represent one local clean tech company whose hardworking CEO was wearing out because of the long commute to the East Bay. And the board ended up leasing him an electric vehicle so he could get the carpool lanes, which saved 90 minutes out of his day. So maybe we get Val back. Yeah.
Yeah. Creative solutions like that, we may need that when we get to the very end. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all. The pipeline.
Okay, with that, on to item number 2, which is our discussion of the staff recommendation about the CLEAN program.
Right. And I'd like to introduce Jim Stack, who's here, the Senior Resource Planner, to present this item.
Thank you, Jane, and good evening, Commissioners. I'm here tonight to talk about the Clean Local Energy Accessible Now program. I think you all are familiar with this, but this is Palo Alto's feed-in tariff program for renewable energy generators that are locally situated. The program is about 3.5 years old now, and every year, toward the end of the year, we've come to you with a little update on changes in the program participation-wise and in terms of the value of the local renewable energy that's generated to the city. So we're here again to talk about those issues. So just some quick backgrounds. The program, it's a feed-in tariff program where the city puts out a standard contract, and anybody who wants to apply, who wants to build a renewable energy system on their site, they can sign this contract and sell all the power from that contract, that project, to the city, and they would then use or pay the retail rate for all the power they use. It was adopted in March of 2012. The council initially set a contract rate of 14 cents per kilowatt hour. The program was initially limited only to solar generation, and it had a 4 megawatt participation cap. That initial rate was set relatively close to the avoided cost, the actual value to the city of the energy that was generated. We had some developers who were interested in the program, but nobody was able to make a project work, so there were no takers that first year. At the end of 2012, council updated the program, increasing the contract rate to 16.5 cents, and limiting the participation in the program from 4 megawatts down to 2 megawatts as a result of that higher rate. Again, there were no takers that following year, so just over a year later, the council updated that again, the only change being an increase in the participation cap from 2 to 3 megawatts. At the end of about a year ago, we came to you with a recommendation to update the program again, maintaining the contract price for solar energy at 16.5 cents. Staff also recommended expanding the eligibility of the program to all renewable energy generation instead of limiting it to just solar. There was some discussion, a great big deal of discussion at this meeting about that, and the Commission ultimately did not support the recommendation to expand the program to non-solar generation, citing basically lack of justification in the report. Staff took the recommendation to the Finance Committee in March of this year. and again supported expanding the program to non-solar renewables, and the Finance Committee supported that recommendation as well. However, the Finance Committee recommended reducing the solar contract price to the avoided cost level, which is also what the recommended price was for non-solar generation. So the Finance Committee recommended reducing the price from 16.5 to 9.3 or 9.4 cents. In May, we took the recommendation of the Finance Committee to the City Council. The City Council approved expanding the program to non-solar renewables at the avoided cost level, 9.3 cents for a 20-year contract or 9.4 cents for a 25-year contract with a 3 megawatt cap on those resources. The City Council decided to maintain the solar contract price at the 16.5 cent level, contrary to what the recommendation was from the Finance Committee. And their reasoning for maintaining that level had to do in part with an anticipated project that was expected to begin around the end of this year, with the Public Works Department leasing rooftop space on several parking garages in the downtown area to a company, and having that company build a series of solar installations on that space. And they were planning to provide the city with about $150,000 in annual revenue payments for that under that lease. The City Council directed that those revenue payments be allocated to the electric fund to offset the rate impact on customers of offering that 16.5 cent level instead of the avoided cost level. So that's the direction we have now. That's where the program stands. It's open to non-solar as well as solar resources, with prices of 16.5 cents for solar resources and 9.3 or 9.4 cents for non-solar resources. There are 20-year or 25-year contract options available to developers, and there are 3 megawatt caps on each of the two types of generation resources. So now on to the second component. I should again mention there have been no takers as of yet. The Public Works Department is continuing to negotiate the lease with another company, not the original company they were negotiating with at this time a year ago, but that company ended up pulling their proposal, and they're negotiating with the second vendor who had submitted a proposal into the city's RFP for that lease. Under that negotiation, they will be providing some revenue payments under the lease, although the lease isn't finalized yet or approved, but they're anticipated to be providing a significantly lower amount of annual revenue payments, roughly in the $20,000 per year range instead of $150,000. So right now, to shift gears a bit and talk about the value of local renewable energy generation. As you know, staff issued an RFP earlier this year for new renewable energy projects. We got a pretty strong response to that, and the prices we saw were even lower than we have seen in prior RFPs for renewables. We will be bringing the final contract to you under that RFP hopefully next month. So it's not finalized yet, but we can share with you. We've kind of shared some of the general information about the pricing with you in updates on that RFP previously. And based on that, it looks like based on kind of looking at the top proposals we received, the ballpark now has shifted from the high 6.5 cent range down to the low 5 cent range, basically, for renewables projects in California. So based on that, the value of solar energy that's generated in Palo Alto has decreased. In March of 2012, we estimated the value to be about 13.5 cents per kilowatt hour, including the value of the energy and the renewable attributes, and avoiding the cost of transmitting the energy from remote resources into Palo Alto, as well as the capacity benefits we receive under the California resource adequacy requirements. That value has steadily decreased as the price of solar energy has dropped. A year ago, we estimated the avoided cost of solar energy to be about 10.3 cents. Now we're estimating it to be 8.9 cents, with the change being pretty much entirely due to the decrease in the renewable energy price that we saw under the RFP. So if we continue to offer a 16.5-cent rate, and if the program was fully subscribed at the 3 megawatt level, the rate impact of offering that rate above the avoided cost level would be about $380,000 per year, which is about 1/3 of 1% of the total revenue coming into the electric fund. For non-solar energy, the avoided cost has also dropped. Again, that's due to the decrease in renewable energy prices we've seen out of our recent RFP. So staff is recommending maintaining the pricing at the avoided cost level, which would now be about 8.1 cents instead of 9.3 cents for a 20-year contract for a non-solar renewable energy generator. And since that's the price would be equal to the avoided cost, there would be no rate impact from participation in that program. But there is still a 3 megawatt cap on total participation from non-solar generators. So that brings me to the staff recommendation. We are basically recommend that we continue the program at under the current structure and at the current prices. Those prices being 16.5 cents for solar energy resources, and maintaining the avoided cost level pricing for non-solar generation, which would push that price down to 8.1 cents for 20 years or 8.2 cents for 25 years for non-solar generators, and maintaining the 3 megawatt contract participation caps. So our plan going forward is to take this recommendation or any motion or advisement that comes from this committee to the Finance Committee in February, and then to the full council in March for approval.
Great, thank you very much. Questions, comments?
Thank you for the presentation. Given the direction from council in May, why is this coming back before us now? Why do you need additional approval? Is it because the guidance that you got through the December 2014 UAC meeting and subsequent Finance Committee and City Council meetings were just directional but weren't actually approving a specific plan?
No, I think we received good direction from the council back in May. We just thought, given the changes we're seeing in the renewable energy market, we thought it would be prudent to come back and discuss those with you and see if you wanted to recommend any changes to the program. So it's not required that we be here, but it's just.
Does it also have to do with the fact that we have to annually decide what we want to do with the program?
Assistant Director Jane Ratchey. We're not required to annually do that. We had that in the council motion for a couple of years that we were required to come back once a year, but we think that's actually a prudent practice, and we'd like to come back annually and update what the avoided cost is and have an opportunity to change the price, perhaps change the cap, depending on what the year's experience of having that program. And we did come 1 year ago to this commission, and then it took us a while to get to the Finance Committee, and then finally went to the council. So it hasn't been a full year since it's gone to the council. But this is generally going to be our practice to come back annually, and that's what this is.
So we shouldn't view this as a follow-on or an update from the direction City Council provided to you in May of 2015. We should view this as the next annual meeting with the UAC following our meeting in December 2014. I see. Okay, that makes sense. Thanks for that clarification. So from my point of view, nothing material has changed. And so I approach this, first of all, by wanting to support staff's recommendation to just go on doing what was put into place following the series of meetings we just referred to, and continue it for another year. In contemplating that, it does seem to me that at some point 16.5 cents a kilowatt hour is going to become sufficiently attractive
to people that we would expect some takers, right? Isn't that the right way to interpret the trends? As the cost of deploying solar drops, the attractiveness to a developer of a 16.5 cents per kilowatt hour guaranteed payment has got to become incrementally more attractive.
That's generally true. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that at the end of next year, a big piece of financial incentive that developers are relying on is scheduled to go away, or at least drop down to significantly. The investment tax credit is supposed to drop from 30% down to 10% next year. So unless that's extended, that could change the.
That's right. Although a lot of solar developers have come to the conclusion that it'll still be worth doing solar projects even as the ITC is phased out, and perhaps they'll find an opportunity to do so under the CLEAN program here in Palo Alto. The other thing I contemplated in coming to that, I really appreciated very much your slide 4, where you showed the annual excess cost rate impact in the event that we were fully subscribed up to our 3 megawatt cap. So we see that that would be as much as $380,000 a year, or 0.32% of the total electric annual budget. In trying to put that number in perspective, my reaction is that's not a trivial or insignificant number. It is a significant number. It's a number that's material to our ratepayers, and we need to weigh it carefully. But I found it helpful to look ahead to our last agenda item tonight on the impact of the drought, and in particular, the cost impact of the drought. And $380,000 is small compared to that. So at least for me, that helped me to understand that although 0.32% is not insignificant, it is much smaller than, for example, what we're already dealing with the drought. And so as I look at the benefits of local solar, which you so nicely summarized somewhere, I guess I don't see it right, but were you so nicely summarized in one of your slides? I'm definitely inclined to support staff's recommendation and continue the program that was approved by City Council last May.
We can go whatever order you want. Do you have? Yeah, you go ahead. You go ahead, Arnie.
First of all, I want to thank you for the detailed report. It was very helpful for me to follow the background. I agree with Commissioner Eagleash. I'm generally very supportive. I did have a few thoughts as I reflected on the data in the report. And so I wanted to share those. I'll hit on 3 of those. The first thought that hits me is that if you go back to the objective of the program, which is to establish supply reliability, that's an interesting one to dig into. When you talk about distributed generation that's inverter-based, today's inverters all have to comply with an IEEE standard, which is IEEE 1547, makes a nice limitation in terms of voltage and frequency, and you can get a bad condition where the single main transmission line coming into Palo Alto droops a bit, and all of the inverters turn off because they're required to. Otherwise, they wouldn't comply with the governing standard. And so your objective is to create supply reliability, but at that one instant when you think you're going to have it, you don't. And so just a general comment that it may be interesting in the future to start thinking about how either new grid support features, which is something that's a coming thing, of course, with inverter-based technology, might be one of the things that you either further incentivize or make required, so that the probability that all of the inverters that are distributed around Palo Alto providing some supply reliability don't turn off at the one moment when you really want them. A second thought, of course, would be to simply make those installations able to operate independent of a utility connection, that gives you the same thing. But that strikes me as one quandary, that you want supply reliability, and you've got it most of the time, but then when you really want it, you may not have it. Second thought, I think in general, of course, what the program goes after is very good, but it does strike me that if you're not seeing a large number of takers, it could be that you want to look at some things like perhaps shorter programs. It could be that one of the problems is people trying to figure out how to create all the financing required in order to hit a 20 or 25-year project instead of a shorter project. Especially when you look at the dynamic nature of things, that may help. And then the third quick thought is that I can sense the conversation coming back that we've had now a couple of times, where we see that a different incentive structure for things that are solar related compared to other renewable technologies, even though the offset cost is roughly the same. And that may lead you in future analyses to want to start looking at when solar deployment increases, or other renewables, what is the burden on the distribution network? Jane's explained to me that we have quite a bit of headroom, but there may be a need to start creating metrics so that you can look at where there are certain deployments in this part of Palo Alto or this part of Palo Alto. There may suddenly be a hidden cost if a pocket problem is created that's not represented in the potential maximum case on your slide 4. Thanks.
First, just a question on your non-solar. Again, thank you, by the way, for excellent piece of paper. Well done. Just the avoided cost on the non-solar, what does that comprise? Is that mostly hydro? Is that how you calculated it? Or how did you calculate that? What are the inputs?
We took a kind of based on our RFP results, we looked at a general cost of renewable energy. We kind of look at the value slightly differently for solar versus for non-solar, because for non-solar...
So the non-solar, what kinds of renewable energy did you look at?
We're assuming it's going to be like a baseload product, kind of like a biomass generator or something like that. It could be a wind energy system, but the project that's most likely to participate under the non-solar portion of this tariff would be something like at the wastewater treatment plant, a biomass generator using the compost or
Is there any
whatever.
Policy reason why we'd prefer solar to non-solar renewable energy?
I don't think it's a policy issue. I think Jim would explain that the shape of the solar output is more valuable than a flat around the clock product, and that's the difference that you see between the avoided cost between the non-solar and the solar. It's just
that's very helpful.
The shape.
Okay, so it has more value that way.
That's right, because the solar comes in during the daytime when prices tend to be a little bit higher, so that's why the avoided cost for solar is a little bit higher than the avoided cost for a baseload resource like biomass.
I appreciate the explanation there. After last month's meeting, I asked a number of people, is there some premium value to local generated solar as opposed to Central Valley generated solar? I didn't get any positive answers, except some said, well, maybe reliability of supply. Arnie's comment was very useful, and I thought in a situation where we did have a big earthquake and we lost our supply from PG&E long distance transmission, we probably couldn't maintain the power networks reliably, effectively at all with 3% solar resource.
If there's an earthquake and the main feed into Palo Alto goes off, all the standard grid-tied inverters will shut off.
Okay.
So typical solar installation is then all off. Right. If you had a licensed electrician and permitted work, you could go in and get that power before it comes to the inverter and do something appropriate with it, but it can't even get to the house.
Now, Arnie, not to get too much into the weeds here, but Arnie's comment suggests that that the solar installations are connected to the grid and could in principle feed power back onto the grid. I thought all of our solar installations were on the customer side of the meter, and the city doesn't really even see that power other than running the meter backwards through net metering.
Well, this program would be different. These generators that are participating in the clean program would not be net metered. They would have, a customer would have two separate meters, one for their load and one for their generation. So the generation would be wholesale, and we would see that and meter that separately.
And just for clarity, grid-tied inverter doesn't care which side of the meter it's on. It has to see the grid. So let's imagine two buildings. One building that has a very small load and a big solar installation, and so power's flowing out. But that inverter, it's a grid-tied inverter, it's following the voltage waveform of the grid. And so if the grid goes out, it goes out. Then you have a little building, a huge building where the power never goes out, and there's actually a net flow of power from the utility into the building. Same case happens. If it's a grid-tied inverter, the inverter's watching for the voltage waveform of the grid. If that goes away, the inverter shuts off.
Great, thanks for that. So just to close on this one item, and it's not particularly, I'm not sure it's relevant to tonight's discussion, but now my curiosity is absolutely piqued. So if a homeowner has rooftop solar through a typical installation with net metering, if there's a power failure in their neighborhood, but the sun is shining, are they still getting power from that solar panel, or are they dropped, as Arnie would suggest, are they dropped just the same way homeowners that have no rooftop solar are dropped?
I think they would be dropped, just like Commissioner Ballantyne said. The only way they wouldn't be is if they had some sort of uninterrupted power supply system, a battery system.
Right.
And that is the only way. And then it would really be the batteries that would be feeding and the system. And you could set it up somehow.
Right.
But that's not what most people do that have
Right. I
metered
understand.
solar. So yeah, I think Commissioner Ballantyne explained it.
Right.
There really isn't a whole lot of resiliency value of the solar by itself. It has to be coupled with
Right, and I see
some
my fellow
storage.
commissioners that have rooftop solar nodding their heads that their ice cream melts just like everybody else's.
I would.
Thank you very much.
I would like to, because this was initiated with Commissioner Danaher's question. I think it might be helpful, Jim, if I don't know how we do it now, but maybe if there's new members of City Council, for them to see the stack that you build, that is the avoided cost on what we're paying for your RFP solar versus, and then the transmission, and he builds up. You haven't seen it with this because it just hasn't come up while you've been on the commission. But there's an excellent, and I don't know if it's in the report, but there's an excellent slide, and there's a very good explanation that you need to hear about how that avoided cost is come. It's an important and serious calculation.
Actually, I take it one step further than just that stacked diagram. On various occasions, a year or two or more ago, we got some wonderful detailed presentations on how to think about the difference between local generation and centralized generation, and all of the different losses and costs, and so it is more than just a simple stack up. And I think if you could dust off and rediscover that detailed presentation, I think it would. I think Vice Chair Cook's making a great point, and I think we've heard similar questions not just from Commissioner Danaher, but from some of the other commissioners who aren't here tonight. And if that could be discovered from a few years ago and dusted off and shared, I remember it as a really clear tutorial that really helped to understand some of the ways in which both tangible and intangible, or sort of concrete and subjective ways in which local generation is different.
Sure.
Right. I would love to see that. But as I understand, the avoided cost is the cost of power delivered to Palo Alto. So it takes into account all the losses and the transmission costs.
Yep.
And I still haven't heard a reason why it's more valuable to us to have electricity generated from James Roof or from downtown than it is from the Central Valley. And if there is, this would be a good time for me to hear the explanation.
That's a good point. I'm sorry I didn't include the slide with that stacked chart showing the breakdown of the avoided costs, but I do have the numbers in a table here in front of me. I can tell you that the energy value, the renewable energy, is about 5.5 cents. The capacity value, the credit we get in kind of a reduced capacity requirements with the California Independent System Operator, is about 0.8 cents per kilowatt hour. Avoiding the charges we pay to the ISO for the transmission coming into the city is worth about 2.1 cents per kilowatt hour. So that's a pretty significant component. And avoiding the losses that would occur on our distribution system from power coming in to the city and going across our distribution system is worth about half a cent.
So all that adds up to 8.9 cents.
So all that adds up to 8.9 cents for solar.
Okay. Jane, were you going to add something?
Yeah, well, I think that's a very good suggestion to add that stack to show how we get to 8.9. But I think part of your question is how do we get from 8.9 to 16.5?
That's really my question.
And if you look at the resolution that's attached to the staff report, that is attachment A, section 3 of that on the second page lists what council's findings were in the past of how they could justify or,
I did
increase
read
these local values. And it says, a portion of the city's electric expenditures remain within the community. I'm not sure how to monetize all these things. I think shading is in here. When solar systems are installed on rooftops, the shade reduces the energy required for cooling and creates value for vehicle owners. And then as new technology and energy storage systems, then you can have this resiliency value. And so if there is an earthquake or some disaster, you could use this in conjunction with future technologies.
I expect
and so
that.
those are the values that they kind of added up and said, we think it's worth more than 8.9 cents or whatever the avoided cost is.
Thank you for that. I want to comment more on that and more questions, but did you want to say something?
Well, I think that just to add some thoughts here, I think the trick is that if you have a 20 or 25-year contract with a project that's using 2015 inverters that follow the pretty restrictive old IEEE 1547, then for 20 or 25 years, they're going to be disconnecting from the grid when you go, and it's unfortunately a fairly narrow window. And it's to give some further explanation, my understanding has always been that this is a legacy item where if a utility person was making a repair, you didn't want inverters dumping power, distributed generators, it's not unique to inverters, you didn't want distributed generators dumping power into that portion of the utility that was being repaired. And I think recent studies indicated that in the first 1 to 5 seconds of an event, there's not a person there repairing the utility. So why not let inverters, which have a unique capability to stay connected all the way down to a case of 0 volts, which sounds weird, but can do it, stay connected all the way down to 0 volts and continue to inject current into the utility connection and help to support it. The problem is that that's a new idea, and the new IEEE 1547 is really only now in 2015 being set up for adoption next year. So I think the trick would be to figure out how to somehow say in an incentive, great, let's go ahead and get this thing online in 2015, but why don't you try to have your hardware ready so that it can be retrofitted to have grid support features like these where it chases all the way down into 0 volts and helps support a sag in voltage, which does create, and this is the thing I wanted to say, does create a local benefit. So if you have grid support capable inverters that are dotted all around Palo Alto and you have voltage dipping for a second in Palo Alto, all of them can chase after that and help to support it. And there are other features that the inverters can go after as well in terms of shifting power factor and so forth to help out. Or, like Jane was saying, have some provision where energy storage is added. But I think the trouble is if they put the thing on the ground and it's there for 20 or 25 years, you know, from what I've seen, that's the inverter you've got, and that's what it's going to do.
That's very interesting. That's very helpful. I come back to, I think our goal is to have as the cleanest possible energy at the lowest possible cost. And if we're spending more than we need to, we're undermining what should be our mission here. And I think $380,000 is small relative to the amount we're going to have to pay for our hydro. But the companies I work with, we equate dollars to head count. And I know the hard work staff could use an extra head count or two on there if you had $380,000 to spend. So I don't think it's negligible. And Steve did admit that it was a sizable sum. I think as I said in my conversations over the last month, the only comment that's been come up for possible value of shading had not been mentioned, and I doubt that the value that's been quantified. But other than that, oh, by the way, I don't believe the analysis that says more value stays in the community if you buy it here, because you're just paying more inefficiently for equipment and installation that you know doesn't go. But I'd rather not subsidize local solar if it doesn't do anything for our grid reliability, which is the only real theoretical value was mentioned to me, and Commissioner Valentine has explained that it doesn't. And in fact, subsidizing solar now that goes in will be subsidizing installations that by definition do not contribute to grid reliability. I would rather, if we were going to do this, bifurcate it and have avoided cost for solar that feeds in and premium cost for solar that provides grid reliability. And whether it's because there's storage technologies that have been adopted or grid support capable inverters, that would be fine. But other than that, and James, I want to hear your views on this. I think photons from the Central Valley are as good as photons from Palo Alto, and that we should be achieving, as long as we're carbon neutral, we should be aiming for the lowest possible cost. So but I welcome other points of view on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it shouldn't be difficult to enter the conversation midstream, but I do think that you've missed there's sort of a body of evidence and discussion that sort of feeds to this, and I'm not going to do it any justice, but there has been an interest for, to encourage more local power generation, and particularly local clean power. And so I think, bless you, I think there, I bless you. I do think there has been a great interest. There's a great interest locally to have that. There's there's interest in people being able to have community solar. There's interest in having more local solar. So I think that I do think that you don't benefit from having seen some of that good discussion, some of the presentations on that.
When I came on this, I had a strong belief in both of those. Local and community solar made good sense to me. But the more I look into it, if the lower cost of having carbon neutral, renewable energy for the city, what would be true in Mountain View is not necessarily true in Palo Alto because of that. If we could, back to Commissioner Valentine's point, if we started subsidizing grid support capable inverters for solar, we might actually accomplish something with that that we wouldn't otherwise. There's another point. I think there's points in time where any demand was going to help drive down the cost curve of solar. We may be past that point now in the market. You would know better than I do. But those are my those are my reaction to it, and the fact that nobody's come up with a compelling reason in the last month that I've talked to on that.
But by the way, the same problem would be represented in the non-renewable, non-solar technology if that was an inverter interconnected piece of hardware. So if that was an engine or a turbine or who knows what that's running off biogas that then runs through power electronics into an inverter and has to follow IEEE 1547, which it would, it'll do the same thing. It'll disconnect from the grid the second that you have a dip. So yeah, I think the grid support piece or energy storage piece or wiring directly to the load, and having dual wiring like grid wiring and load wiring, something like that is really the only way you end up having reliability to go with your local solar or local generation.
Okay, I think we've had a full discussion. Did you?
No,
yeah,
no.
I like to repeat what Commissioner Aglash said. Thank you for the presentation. Thanks for following up on this. I'm glad we understand, the why we're doing this and how we're doing this. I too support the staff's recommendation. I just have a couple of very small recommendations, Jim, for your presentation. One is I would add the word avoided in front of cost in slides 4 and 5. I think that, you've got your little tables there. I think it's key that if it were simply cost, we probably would have a lot of people taking us up on the offer to do the feed-in tariff at 16.5 cents if the cost was 9 cents. I think it's just important to put the avoided, and if it seems to make sense to you, I think it would be advantageous to have one slide on this discussion of both the stack of costs as well as the other perceived benefits of clean, local, renewable energy. So some of which can't be quantified or are difficult to quantify. So maybe but how did we get to 14 cents originally? I think that could be helpful. Maybe your city council audience doesn't need that reminder, but I think you certainly could have it in the back of the presentation if need be. But I do think if there's any way to get the utilities commissioners either a link to the old presentation from 2 or 3 years ago that does at least talks about what it was then to get to 14 cents, that would be helpful for us to all get a brush up. And then I'm going to ask Commissioner Danaher and maybe Commissioner Ballantyne to call up our friends at Clean, the Clean Coalition, to maybe see if they can look at the website, maybe see some of the other benefits. But at least those of us who've been drinking the Kool-Aid have seen that there is a value and a desire to have this local generation. So from my perspective, I'd like to go ahead and I recommend that we just approve the recommendation as is. So if there's no other discussion, does anyone have a motion?
Sure. I will move that we recommend that City Council adopt the resolution as proposed by staff.
I'll second. An opportunity now to either provide an alternative measure or to have a discussion, which, do you guys have any, or we can vote if you don't want to do either of those. Do you guys have anything you'd like to do, discussion or an alternative measure?
I think that the whole idea of factoring grid support into something like this is going to take time. So I'm on board with the proposal as it is, because I think that needs some time. You're going to have to think about how you would do that. How do you set something up so that, yep, I want it year one. I know the old rules are the old rules, but I'd like it in the future to go the new way. That's going to take time to figure out how to do, and this is what we have right now. So.
And I guess I'll just add, I'm not at all insensitive to the concerns that Commissioner Danaher has raised, as well as some of the other concerns that we've heard about this subject in the past. Like what really is the significance of this when we already have a zero carbon electric supply. I think there are a broader set of issues to address at some point, but I believe to go ahead and do what's recommended by staff and was approved by City Council just 6 months ago, 7 months ago, is the right thing to do now, and I think we can deal with those other thornier and more fundamental questions going forward. At least that's my recommendation.
Also, have you looked at the question that Commissioner Ballantyne said about shorter contracts? Have you looked at that at all? I've just blindly always thought the longer contracts are better, or at least long enough to finance a project.
We did solicit some some feedback from developers about what term of contract they would like to see when we recommended changing the program last year to include a 20-year and a 25-year. I think we got 1 or 2 folks who suggested they might be interested in like a 5 or 10-year type of contract. It wasn't an overwhelming push for that, but that's something we could certainly consider.
I think when you look at the non-solar things, that's one area where that might be particularly helpful, only because there's so much change in that field as well. So, getting everything put together for 20 or 25 years can be challenging, those technologies.
Okay, and any other thoughts? Commissioner Danner?
No,
Yeah, I wonder, Jim, do you think it'd be also helpful, my last thought was on the presentation was, is it helpful to point out one more time what projects are eligible for this? Because I don't want Commissioner Danaher thinking that he can get 16.5 cents when he installs, a kilowatt system on his roof. This is a specific type of project and size of project, isn't it? I mean, it's not me putting 5 panels on my roof.
No, I believe it's open to any size
It is
project
open,
now.
okay.
Yeah, we
So
removed
I wouldn't get net metering, I'd get 16 cents, okay.
Right.
All right.
Yeah, we initially had a size
Go ahead,
restriction
then you
on
can
it,
go ahead and
but
do that.
we removed that.
Thank you. I did want to ask, it looks like the city is considering one lease that would take up a lot of this, and then they'd give the money back to the utility. Do I read that correctly in the memo?
I'd like to actually clarify that a little. I know Jim went over that, and that's on slide 3. But just in response to what Commissioner Eglash said about this is the same recommendation as Council just approved in May, I want to point out that what they approved in May, remember this was controversial at the time, they had a very different recommendation from the Finance Committee, and what, at that time, the avoided cost was, the total annual excess cost on slide 4 was $310,000, and the lease payment that they were expecting for 1.5 megawatts, which was half of it, was about $150,000. So the lease payment basically covered the excess cost, and that's the only way that council ended up agreeing to the 16.5 cents. The situation is different now. We are not expecting nearly as big of a lease payment, and so this is a very different place than what the council left the last decision they made. And so what that effectively was is we thought at the time that we'd have 1.5 megawatts out of the 3 being this garage, and they would essentially pay this excess cost. They directed those lease payments to go to the electric utility. And at this point, Jim, I believe that the lease payments are far, far less than that for a slightly smaller amount now. They're only looking at 4 garages rather than 5. The negotiations haven't been completed yet, but they're ongoing. So this is, I just want to point out that what the council decided on May this year is not the same as the situation we have now. For one thing, the lease payments have lowered. For another thing, the avoided cost has declined. And so that excess cost is higher. So I just want to make sure that you understand what you're voting on.
I think so, but does that change your enthusiasm for your own motion there, Commissioner Eglash?
I also see you were going to comment. Did you want to comment before I did?
No, it's okay.
Okay. So thank you for that clarification. I don't think anything has significantly changed, and it's because I'm viewing what's happened differently than you are. I actually think that City Council's support for this, despite the recommendation of the Finance Committee, was because there's a significant fraction of our city and City Council that has a lot of support for the notion of local solar. And as we've heard tonight and in past meetings, that may or may not hold up under rational scrutiny for a whole lot of reasons. But I think the support for local solar is, while it may wane over time, it hasn't waned very far and very deeply yet. And so my feeling is that what's happened in discussions this year is a number of people have just reminded us and voted their feeling that local generation of solar has a lot of both tangible and intangible, objective and subjective benefits, not all of which are captured by the avoided cost. I mean, I'll just point out that I was one of the most vocal opponents to having the feed-in tariff price so high in our prior discussions. I think a whole case can be made that we no longer need to do things this aggressive to encourage solar. I'm supporting this tonight irrespective of that and irrespective of my prior positions because I don't think much has changed since May. I think that strong thread of emotional as well as rational support for local solar is still there.
On that note, we have a motion and a second. So let's take, and we've had discussion. Let's take a vote.
May I
Yeah, please go ahead.
It'd be nice if it went to the city council with a page or half page that was very explicit as to what are the benefits of local solar and what aren't. Because there may be city council members who believe that it provides support for the grid when it doesn't. And shading is valuable, and maybe symbolism may be valuable. There'd be different things that people could articulate. But I would prefer that the recommendation goes forward with a very succinct list of what the potential benefits are and what they aren't. Because
would you be satisfied if Jim Stack added a slide in his presentation kind of to that effect?
Yes. Yes.
I think the most important is if the slide just very plainly explains that in a worst case, a significant earthquake, utility power is out, anyone with local solar with traditional grid-tied inverters is not powering their building or the grid.
That's a good caveat. I hadn't heard that till tonight, so thanks for explaining. So, okay, so we have a motion and a second, so I'd like to take a vote. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed?
I'll abstain.
And did you vote?
Oh, I thought you were voting in favor.
Yeah, so like, sorry, I should.
I didn't make that as an amendment. Jim said he'd put it in his presentation.
Yeah. Okay, so.
I'm abstaining, not because I'm persuaded you're right, but because you persuaded me I should do a little more education.
Okay, so the motion had a 3-0 vote with one abstention. We didn't get we didn't get a majority of the.
No. You need a majority to have a quorum. Once you have a quorum, you only need a majority of the people voting.
Thank you. So we have a 3-0 vote. Majority of our group here tonight. Thanks.
And just to be clear, the motion is the staff recommendation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
With a friendly request. Thank you. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Commissioners.
Let's go on to item number 3.
Just to wrap that up, last month we talked about having a discussion about the value of local solar. I don't think tonight satisfies my wish on that, and I'd love to have that on an agenda. I thought it was going to be an explicit agenda item. I'd like it if we have it an agenda item, perhaps for January, and we could invite the Clean Coalition or whatever to make that presentation. It's important.
You might want to think about suggesting that on agenda item number 4.
Okay, thank you, Jane.
Thank you. Okay, item 3, please.
Okay, this next item, there is no staff presentation or discussion. This is for the commission to discuss. These are the key items that were brought up at the last joint meeting with the council and the UAC.
Okay, I appreciate that. It's our hard-fought agenda item. I think that because we have such a smaller group, I know that others will like to participate in this. We'd like to probably have this appear again when the other commissioners are back. I guess we could just go item by item and just say if we've got any updates here. I can tell you that there is quite a bit going on with, and I think we've heard some of it with fiber to the premises. I don't know if, you're on the subcommittee on that. Do you have anything else to add about that?
No, I think this is up to date on that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There was-
Also, do we have a, okay, we do have, this should precede our conversation on the board. We have one member of the public who'd like to speak on item number 3. Herb Brock, please.
Thank you, Vice Chair Cook and Commissioners. Yeah, this week, this mic, okay, yeah.
Come on up.
This is the third meeting where that microphone's volume is down of this week, and the second time I'm mentioning it, and I'm surprised.
Hopefully you don't have to go to the third.
Responsible staff hasn't fixed it yet, or maybe they fixed it so that the public microphone is
The result of your asking.
lower. Since staff, and I guess the committee on fiber doesn't have an update for you for the city council meeting on Monday, I was there.
I got a report from that. I wasn't going to make a report, but
Oh,
I
okay,
would love to
okay.
hear, love to hear from you.
I did want to bring one thing to your attention, and that is, as your minutes that you approve record, there was a discussion at your last meeting about having an agenda item and somehow making it happen about the fiber issue, and it was suggested doing it in January, and so that Commissioner Schwartz could be here, and Chair Foster indicated, to have Dr. Reichenthal, and also there was some back and forth as to how you can get something on your agenda that the Commission wanted, that whose agenda was it. At Monday night's council meeting, there was a proposal that had been come through from the citizens that the city manager had appointed to advise them. There were originally 9, there were 6 left, and this proposal came from 5 of 6 of them. It had been going over a series of things, starting with Bob Harrington, of having the city pay to connect to all the homes for the Google fiber system that people didn't want to pay for themselves. And over time, originally it was just in exchange for having 2 fibers to each home, and then it grew to having the city have its own fiber network connected. And as I understood the proposal that finally came from them on Monday night, it was to do everything, residences and businesses, both. Although if you know what Google's been doing, it's just been doing residence system, and it's just starting to consider businesses elsewhere, but it doesn't do its entire network. The proposal that finally came through from the Citizens Advisory Committee was from 5 of the 6 remaining members, so 3 are no longer on it. And at Monday's night meeting, there was a 6th name added, and that was Chair John Foster, the Utilities Advisory Commission himself, with this proposal. So given what the chair of the commission has done versus what he was saying, should be going on, or the commission having a meeting, and plus the fact that you have a committee of the commission on this, I don't know quite what the appropriate thing is, since I am not one of the persons who'd be concerned about that. I don't think it's up to me to express an opinion about it, but to the extent that you didn't know about it, I think you should know about it as soon as it happened. In my opinion, what was being proposed is essentially having Google negotiate with itself and give it something that it wouldn't otherwise get, which is a connection to everybody else. As my best memory is, it costs $70 a month for residences to connect to for data only, and I think $120 for data and TV. And if you have a 2-year contract, you don't have any additional expense. Otherwise, it's a $300 connection fee. And for anybody else, who doesn't want that, it's $300. And for 7 years, you get 5 megabits down and 1 megabit up. And in exchange for the city paying for that out of the fiber fund, the proposal is the city would also pay for the fiber that Google would pull on behalf of the city, but it wouldn't be lit up. And as a knowledgeable person explained to me after the meeting, that if you want to know whether that fiber is deteriorating, the only way to find out is if it's lit up and to see what's going on and to repair it. And at that point, there's no indication of how the city decides whether it wants to light it up, that is, whether there's some service level agreements with Google. So that's where that stands. And I guess, I don't know, I guess I've seen this type of negotiating tactic before. Also appearing at the meeting was a letter from Google to Assistant City Manager Shikata, which was placed at places for the agenda item on the fiber that said Google, they called it a donation, will donate $1 million for the Adobe bicycle bridge under 2 conditions. One, that it's designed in a certain way that it would like, protect the birds, and also as a condition that it will be used as a mitigation for any future traffic mitigation for some project unnamed in the future. And for some reason, that was stuck at places on the fiber thing. And I guess you can't bribe people, but you can make a donation to their favorite charity.
That's right. That's right. I appreciate
that's
your.
what looked to me.
I appreciate your comments.
Yeah. So essentially, what's going on now, we're told, is the city manager is the point person negotiating with somebody at Google. What one of the Citizens Committee members recommended during one of their previous meetings was that there should be informal negotiations, find out what they want to agree to, and then come to the council and ask for, say, an RFP for whoever would want to do that, although you already know they agreed to it. And the Citizens Committee has continued to say Google isn't the only option for that. It could be AT&T. But the city manager, for the first time, was the only person who has admitted that AT&T is not the same thing because they already have a fiber network in Palo Alto, and the only thing that they're going to be doing is changing the connection from this service interface area to the individual homes. So it's only Google that can be involved in this type of negotiation.
I understand. So we're pretty informal here, but you have taken about 8 minutes. So
I'm sorry.
I know it's all right.
Yeah, over there
we'll blame it on the hardware here.
No.
But
I appreciate the time.
If you don't mind wrapping up, and then we'll.
So anyone else who may have seen the meeting or whatever can sort of give what I left out.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for the
please.
time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you coming.
I will comment briefly for those you were here. The proposal was that the city negotiate with Google or AT&T for a dig once, pull once plan where we bear perhaps the marginal cost of having extra fiber brought through the same kind construction was done, thinking it'd be a cost-efficient way. And the other part of the proposal was, as an incentive to them, that the city guarantee that there would be 100% connections to homes, whether or not people bought the service. I did not sign the memo because I didn't feel that I had vetted or understood the details of it enough to be able to make a recommendation. But I thought the idea is worth exploring, and the city council voted 9-0 to explore the idea in negotiations with Google.
And it seems to me where we are on this is essentially this body has said, let's wait until we know all the information by the end of the year and then look at it again in January. Is that sort of where we are?
That was specifically with respect to doing an RFP to invite outsiders to propose to do a system with the city. and to find out where we are with AT&T and Google. And I think this effort of negotiating with either or both to see if they can collaborate with laying down duplicate line is part of that.
Anything else? Okay. So do anyone here have any other updates they'd like to make on any of these 5 items that we've identified in our meeting earlier this year with the City Council as being hot button important items? They had any other items you'd like to cover? I don't have any update on undergrounding of electric lines, and I don't have any update on the second electrical connection. And specifically, I point out those 2 because those are both items that we'll have on our agenda in the coming months. So I don't feel like there's anything additional that we need to do on those. Obviously, both important issues, but the staff has been working on those, and we'll be getting information on that soon. Recycled water, electrification.
I think Commissioner Eglash had recommended that we not discuss
That's
that,
right.
and
Yes,
I think
thank
the
you.
report here is sufficient.
Yeah, okay. All right, I think we can close that agenda item. As a discussion item, we'll go on to item number 4, which is selection of potential topics for discussion at future UAC meeting. And I know at least one commissioner has one item for a future.
Jane, thank you again for keeping me in order. I'll learn eventually. Yeah, I would like to recommend that we do have a discussion item, the assessment of the value of local solar versus, I don't know, what do you call it? What terms do you use for utility scale solar you buy? Yeah.
Wait,
okay.
so what's the request again?
Well, I'd like to have a discussion item next month, and maybe we'll get members of the community to comment. What's the value of locally generated solar versus utility scales solar that we purchase from Central Valley or elsewhere? And I don't know the right way to phrase it, but that's the agenda topic I would like to have.
Okay.
And to be clear, you're asking for an agenda item. You're not satisfied to just look at the materials that we asked staff to provide?
No, because I don't think those materials really address my question. I understand the components that go into avoided costs. That was never my question. I'm happy to look at those materials and study it more, but, and I'm going to look at what the Clean Coalition has, but I think it's worth with the full body here, worth a discussion on that.
And so we'll just agendize it as a commission discussion.
No, as a staff presentation, I think is what you're asking for.
I don't want the staff to do a lot of work. If we could have a 3-minute presentation or whatever that, here's what.
I mean, it would take a lot of staff work to try to monetize the things that are already in the council resolution that itemize the things that council has made a determination that are of value besides above and beyond the avoided cost.
Are there any items already on the agenda in the next year or so where this would come up as a natural part of the discussion anyway?
Well, hopefully, as Jim said, next month we will have the new renewable energy power purchase agreement, which could set the new.
What about in April when we do the electric financial plan and rate adjustments? Would it come up naturally at that time?
I don't believe so, no.
Yeah, but that's on the city council side.
We don't need a staff presentation or maybe one slide to remind us what elements the city council identified. I wasn't asking you to do an economic study.
Yeah, we could put a slide together that said that.
You don't need my concurrence to suggest something for a future agenda item, but speaking for myself, I don't see the point or value of a commission discussion item on this subject. My feeling is that this is only useful at such time as it makes sense for staff to make a presentation. I can't imagine the value or interest of a commission discussion absent a staff presentation. This is a topic that's amenable to facts, not just uninformed opinions. And so I would want staff sharing facts with us to inform our discussion.
I do think after the conversation tonight, I'm more than sufficiently motivated to work with legal counsel to figure out the right way to write the memo so that I can explain, walk through IEEE 1547, so that then you can kind of see step by step what happens in an earthquake if we lose the grid.
But is that what you're looking for?
I think it's only a small piece.
Well, I'll tell you what, Steve, based on your advice, I'll hold off on making this request. Basically, what I heard tonight is that for council feels there's political support for local solar. I feel a lot of that support may be uninformed. And so I think it's something we should address as a policy city for the city and in a concerted way, and with proponents of local solar having a chance to say their piece.
I agree, and it seems to me we've heard a request before, although I don't think I see it on, yes, I think I've heard a request before, perhaps from Chair Foster, for a comprehensive discussion of how to think about renewables, including local generation distributed generation versus centralized generation. And I believe that's reflected in the second from the last of the to be scheduled items, which says the long-term electric acquisition plan update, but then here's the part that I think was added, including evaluation criteria for renewables projects. My recollection is that that was specifically to address the question of distributed solar versus utility scale centralized, and why we should be doing anything to encourage local solar at all, given that we have zero carbon electricity. So I believe we already have a to be scheduled item that ought to include things that both you and Commissioner Ballantyne are talking about. I think it's been recognized previously exactly what you're saying, Commissioner Danaher, that there is a much broader and strategic question here. How do we want to continue to guide the generation of electricity in Palo Alto, given all the things that have changed in the last couple of years?
I'll hold off my request for making this an agenda item for next month.
Any other items? Okay, that item number 4 closed, and we'd like to hear the update on the drought.
Hello, Carla Daly, Senior Resource Planner. This will be really fast. Here we are. This is our cumulative water savings from January 1st through November 25th. You can see we're a little over 27% to date. And this shows, again, the total amount of water that we calculated we needed to save over the compliance period compared to the baseline period. That was a little bit over 1 million CCF, and as of November 25th, we are over that. And so the way to interpret that is that for the rest of the compliance period, we used exactly the same amount of water that we used in 2013, then we would still meet our target. And we knew that we had to be in a position like this time of year because largely outdoor irrigation is not happening, and that's where the savings come from. Oh yeah, and cumulative for the compliance period is 32.7%. And this slide was already referenced in an earlier item on the agenda. Here is the impact of the drought on the hydro cost, and you can see that we are still quite a bit under the rate impact of 1.5 million. That's it. Thank you.
So unless anyone else have a question, I certainly have one. What happens, so we've discussed the possibility that there might be some rain coming towards us and some of the risks of locally of the rain and the preparedness that we have to be for the rain. But it's not that if it rains a lot, that doesn't necessarily mean we're in the clear. Can you explain how the difference between getting rain and then being like the drought, and then where we are in terms of would we still have to keep on conserving at this extraordinary level?
Right. Well, there's a lot of different pieces of the puzzle, of course, and one big one is what the state is going to do in this next year. The state is already gearing up for being able to respond to a 5th year of drought and or extending some of the current restrictions on water use to be permanent restrictions. And there are a lot of discussions happening on that end. And we've provided input through CMUA to point out that implementing some of those state restrictions costs money. It's staff time and resources and marketing costs, in addition to the long-term impact of our reduced revenue and how that is impacting a lot of agencies across the state. And so asking the State Water Resources Control Board to think very carefully about how aggressive to be in long-term conservation without knowing where we're going to be from a real water shortage standpoint. So I would also add that if we get a lot of rain for Palo Alto, since most of our supply comes from SFPUC, we really need that precipitation to come in the form of snow in the Sierra, and we don't really know, even if we get a lot of rain, what the snowpack will look like, so only time will tell on that front as well. But we have had 4 very, very severe dry years, and so we're going to need several years of good precipitation and good Sierra snowpack in order to really make a difference. So it's tricky messaging right now because we're telling people we still need to conserve and we're still in a drought, but also ramping up for sandbags and flooding as a result of El Nino. So it's a tricky communication place to be. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it does, and actually I think we're doing quite a good job. We, being you, are doing a good job of communicating this tension and being able to do both at the same time, so thanks very much. Anything else? Any commissioner, thank you very much, Carla Daly. Any commissioner comments?
In our packet, we had the memo about solar heating. Is it legal for me to make comments with regard to that, or does it need to be on the agenda?
Yeah, it doesn't need to be on the agenda, so it would need to be, we could go back to that item, I guess, on the agenda and request to be brought back for a discussion if that's what the commission would like.
Got it. I'd like to be able to make comments about that, so I think it's worth discussion.
So yeah, we want it to be an agenda
I propose
item.
it certainly doesn't have to be in January, but
I think
January,
it is.
February.
Is it on the rolling calendar or not? Did I make that up?
It was on the rolling calendar for
this
meeting,
okay,
but then it wasn't on the agenda.
Jane, what can we comment on?
There's an info item in the packet.
Yeah, it's very nice write-up. Right.
And so if you want this back on a future agenda for discussion, again, staff would not anticipate any presentation or additional work.
Same write-up, but
Okay.
then we could talk about it.
Okay. Yeah, because so it's in the packet but not on the agenda. Okay, so we'd like
Just
to
like
have,
the quarterly report.
okay, so we'd like to have this item added to the agenda. Any other comments? Okay, our next scheduled meeting has been moved from the first Wednesday of January to, I think it's the second Wednesday, is that correct? So we meet on the 13th of January, is that correct? Okay, well, Happy New Year, everyone. Happy holidays. Thank you so much for a good meeting. Adjourned.